Yep.
Hello, class, and welcome to this week's module, which is on direct response marketing with a primary focus on digital. It almost sounds out of date to talk about the huge impact that digital and social media marketing have had on traditional forms of marketing. But as we will discuss in this module, performing arts marketers are rethinking their budgets and staff structure in response to the overwhelming influence of digital. And today we are going to speak with Erik Ginsler. He's the founder of Capacity Interactive, a digital marketing consulting firm for culture and the arts. Capacity Interactive partners with leading arts and cultural organizations in the US and internationally to help them build audiences, engage community, and market smarter. And their practice areas include digital advertising, web analytics, search engine optimization, search engine marketing, email strategy, and online fundraising. And Erik founded Capacity Interactive in 2008, and he began something called Digital Marketing Bootcamp that you should attend at some point. Digital Marketing Bootcamp for the Arts in 2011. Erik is a sought-after speaker on the digital marketing for the arts world, in the digital marketing for the arts world. He's presented at Opera America, the League of Resident Theaters, Dance USA, among others, and he has guest lectured at Yale, Columbia, New York University, and now Roosevelt University. Welcome, Erik.
Thanks, Charlie. I'm really happy to be here.
Good. So we are going to talk for the next 30 minutes or so about a groundbreaking study that Capacity Interactive did in partnership with the research consulting firm Wolf Brown to understand media usage by performing arts ticket buyers. And this national study, which was released in December of 2017, surveyed nearly 27,000 performing arts ticket buyers and included patrons of dance, opera, theater, and symphonies. Why did you decide to undertake this study?
It's a good question. We were getting asked quite a bit from our clients like you, questions that I didn't feel like I could answer with 100% certainty. Questions like, are my subscribers reading the newspaper, and if so, are they then buying online? Or how does Facebook usage compare to newspaper reading? Or should I be spending my money on my NPR station anymore? People listening to the radio. And we saw lots of studies from eMarketer and Pew and other organizations like that were giving answers for general consumers, not necessarily arts buyers. And what I wanted to feel comfortable saying with certainty was that we have surveyed a group of people who we know have bought tickets. And so the universe is actually people who we were guaranteed buyers, and then have their answers compiled to understand their media habits. And so I had breakfast about 6 months before we did the survey with Alan Brown, who's our mutual friend. And, I needed a legitimate statistician to help with this. I didn't feel like we're not a market research firm, we're digital marketers. And so Alan said the best way to do this would be a study that we partnered with arts organizations who then would compile lists of people who had purchased tickets to their events and send them a survey. So we partnered with Wolf Brown, designed a survey that we knew we would pass through to ticket buyers through where they purchased the ticket. And that's how we had all this data. And I can we'll walk through the methodology, but having that certainty, it's saying these are actually people who have bought tickets, makes me feel much more confident in the data when answering these questions asked by arts administrators.
Well, that's a great point, because it's for marketers, it's always about the actions people take, not necessarily what they answer on a survey that they might or might not do.
Right.
So I think that makes your study all the more sound. Well, why don't we move through the report, and we can start with generational differences in media usage, which is really often a point of discussion amongst all marketers.
Definitely. So let's start up the shared screen here.
Sure.
There we go. So let's skip. We walk through who I am. You gave me a very nice intro. That's our team here based in New York. And we, as a firm, we work exclusively with arts and cultural organizations, which is why we were interested in studying, the behavior of that sector. And thank you for the call out about boot camp, which is coming up this October. And we also do free webinars if your students are interested. We do these free capacity classroom webinars. In fact, there was one that just wrapped up 10 minutes ago that we did on pivot tables in Excel. So if you like data and analytics and digital marketing and the arts, they're totally free, so you can sign up. We do generally one a month. I also have a podcast that is, if you're into arts administration, I talk to people just about, arts administration. And so we release those every 2 weeks. Just to circle back here on the methodology, we ended up partnering with 58 organizations. When I talked to Alan, we were hoping for 20. And what we did was reached out to Capacity Interactive clients and Wolf Brown clients. And these were the ones that said they were interested and ended up sending the survey to their constituents. And you can see here it's weighted definitely in cities where there are more arts organizations, and often states where there are concentrations of cities with arts organizations. And so definitely heavily weighted on the East and West Coast. You mentioned the type of organizations. We had about 27,000 people take the survey, and that fell across dance, music, theater, and presenters, with theater and presenters being the heaviest responders. Although it's just such a large sample there, when we broke down and looked at the data of the difference between each of those genres, it wasn't a ton of difference. And what we did find was most of the difference was based upon age. And so when you get like music attendees, they tend to be older, which skewed their data to be more aligned with how we saw older people answering. But we can talk about some of those differences later. And so the Wolf Brown created this really cool dashboard. It's called the Intrinsic Impact Dashboard. And so each organization that took the survey got access to this dashboard. And so they could go in and look at their own data and slice and dice their data however they want to, and they could compare it with other organizations. So here, this is the Goodman Theater comparing themselves with all the other theaters that took the survey, and they can, slice and dice the data in all sorts of ways, and they still have access to this, which is really cool. So here they, looking at their own data, and this dashboard is really cool, and the ability to compare with peers was really important to us, and being transparent about the data. So all organizations that signed up to do this agreed to share their data. So you can see it.
Cool.
So you asked about generational patterns, and that is the first key finding. And as I mentioned, one of the things that was confirmed by this study is that media usage is very much generational. And so when we look at older audiences, for example, are much more likely to subscribe. And so this was one of these pieces of data that was kind of like confirmation that the data was good. Like we know this. Any arts marketer worth their salt knows this. And so we want to say, okay, is this data legit? And this was validating. I think the one notable thing here was that 8% of those 18 to 24 identified as a current or lapsed subscriber, which honestly was surprisingly high to me, and frankly, it was gave me hope. That the subscription model is indeed alive even for younger people. And as we all know, people who are older have more time and more money, which is often why they subscribe. I'm 40 and I'm starting to actually subscribe to arts organizations, which perhaps validates this. When I was in my 20s, I had neither the time nor the money to be going to subscribe to arts organizations. So I thought this was really interesting. The first mass media we looked at was broadcast television. And I think most arts organizations are typically not spending their money on broadcast TV, with the exception of those that are doing more mass market programming. So an example would be like a Nutcracker or a Christmas Carol that has more of a broad appeal. It's oftentimes the anchor of a theater or ballet company's season, and they really need to get a lot of new people in the door that aren't typical arts attendees. And with that large goal comes larger marketing budgets, and some arts organizations are still using broadcast TV. So we wanted to look at who's watching broadcast TV of these 27,000 arts buyers. And I also should have said a methodology. In order to take the survey, you had to have purchased a performing arts ticket within the last 2 years. So everyone who answered this is someone who had purchased or subscribed either a single ticket or a subscription within the last 2 years. So we call those likely attendees. If you had purchased in the past 2 years, you're a likely attendee. And some of the people had purchased in the last few months. Some were a little more lapsed, but definitely that last 2 years. And all of the data is weighted to not overestimate loyalty metrics for subscribers. Now, this sort of statistics is above my understanding, but Wolf Brown built some sort of weight in here to not over-index subscribers when it came to a lot of these factors, because if someone is a subscriber, they're intensely loyal and their behavior is on an extreme. So they massage the data to get a lot of those impurities out of it. So I think
single ticket buyers were included in a proportional.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. It's proportional. So not surprising, people who are older are watching more broadcast TV, and this was actually surprising to me. If we layer in here more, when you look at those under 34, almost half are never watching broadcast television. Which, if you had done this survey 15 years ago, I think these results would have been very different. But obviously, younger people have fully adapted to Netflix and Hulu and smart TVs and are not watching commercial television. Younger audiences spend more time on smartphones, and so here we start to see this contrast of 20th century versus 21st century media. And you can see that younger people, those 18 to 24, more than half spend at least 2 hours per day on a smartphone. Many spend far more than that. And then if you layer in here, you can see even those 75 or older, about half are spending at least 30 minutes a day on a smartphone. And only a third of those 75 and over are not spending time on a smartphone. So you can see there's blue in about 90% of this in terms of smartphone usage, but it's definitely tied to age. The frequency is definitely tied to age. So we could have done a whole research paper just on these generational correlations, and we have charts and graphs about that. But this is sort of, I summarized this for you. Generational media patterns, high correlation, meaning older people are more likely to spend their time with print, cable broadcast and satellite TV. Again, this is not Netflix or streaming TV, public radio, and email news notifications. The younger folks tend to spend more time in apps for news organizations, getting news push notifications, screening online audio and video. This is where Netflix comes in, social media usage, and then no real, pretty much equal among online news sites and commercial radio. So I thought that was interesting. Older and younger people are definitely getting their news online, and we talk more about that later. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's really fascinating. It's so wonderful to have this kind of information, because it just allows for that much more ability to target from a marketer standpoint. But I know we'll talk even more about that as we go forward. What did was it email that you studied next?
Yeah, I think, let's see. Actually, it was, yes. And that sort of fell under sources of arts of information. And so the first section was about what media is used by different age, and this is so okay. We know who uses what media, but specifically, what media are they using to learn about arts events? And so, as arts marketers, we want to know where are people turning when they're asking the question, what should I see or what should I attend? And to your note, email is the primary source for upcoming events across all age cohorts. So we asked the question, where do you find out about upcoming arts events that in your neighborhood or in your area or in your city? And this was one of the few things that was universal across all ages, whether you're 18 or 75. The majority of these arts buyers said they learn about arts events through email. And so
this is really interesting because, email is what, now 20 years old, something like that now. And it feels like email continues to be this really, this is evidence. It continues to be this strong source of information for people.
Yeah, it's, I think the reason we see this is because it goes back to permission marketing, and the people that are on your email list have raised their hands to receive this information. So you're talking to a group of people who are already engaged, right? How do people get on the email list, say, the Seattle Symphony? Well, they either came to your website and gave you their email address, or they bought a single ticket or subscription or gave a donation. And so you're speaking to people that already care about you. We talk about permission marketing as the idea of turning strangers into friends, friends into customers, and customers into evangelists. These are not strangers, these are friends and customers, which is why cultivating an email list and nurturing it in terms of smart email communication is so important for arts organizations, because it's a list of people who are engaged, and you can see are using those emails to learn about what they're going to attend.
Yeah, it says as much about, I suppose, in a way, about how marketers have become smarter about email as much as anything. It's not, as you're saying, we're not just spamming with email anymore. If you're at all a follower of Seth Godin, you know that you've got to provide personal, relevant, and anticipated. Thank you. Kinds of information to people on your email list.
Absolutely, yeah. I think marketers definitely. There was a time, I think we're marketers, and where spam became a real issue, and marketers were in email. And I remember back in the day when I worked in New York City Opera, our newsletters would get like a 40 or 50% open rate, which any marketer would dream about now. It's I think email, that people used to read every single email that came in their inbox, and now with Gmail's promotional folders and much stronger spam filters and people just being inundated with email, we're getting more email than ever and reading less of it. So the importance of being smart and strategic and providing valuable content. I often say, like, email should be thought of as content the same way social media should be thought of as content. It's not just a place to spam people with sales messages. You really want to use that as a way to engage people and tell the story of your organization and share ways to educate people to get them to attend more and be excited about what you're presenting.
Was this all? Did you have another slide in this section on generational patterns, or rather consumption information?
This is about sources. So after email, which you see layered in here, so we kept the blue bar on top. We're looking at sources for upcoming events, and so we have email. The second most identified source for younger audiences for learning about upcoming arts events is social media. And you can see how directly correlated to age that is. Those 18 to 24, 74% identified social media as how they find out about arts events. And then when you go to older generations, that declines. the next bar there, the darker blue bar, looks at outdoor posters, billboards, and marquees, which I thought was a really interesting finding, that outdoor advertising, according to this study, is more effective for younger folks than it is for older folks. And I think if you think about who's seeing outdoor advertising, it's people who are, out and about. They're seeing it on the subway, they're seeing it on the phone kiosks, they're traveling to
telephone
work.
Poles.
Exactly, as opposed to older people that are perhaps may not be out and about as much. They're not seeing it as frequently. So the next thing we looked at was direct mail. And so again, here we're looking at email, flyers, and postcards. We looked at flyers, postcards, and brochures. And that is the inverse relationship, where actually quite effective for younger folks in terms of learning about arts events, but it's really effective for older generations. Yes. And I think this also ties to permission marketing the same way email does. I think those on your mailing list tend to have engaged with the organization. They're on your mailing list because they bought a ticket, either your venue or as arts organizations trade names, generally you're direct mailing people who are regular arts attendees. And I don't think younger people are running to their mailbox to see what mail they're getting. I think that's definitely like a 20th century sort of behavior, which was validated here. And then the next most listed identified source for finding out about upcoming arts events is newspaper. And you can see dramatically the age correlation. Interestingly, though, for even the older folks, even look at 55 to 64, which is a really important arts buying demographic, 88% email, 72% flyers, postcards, brochures, then drops down to 51% for newspaper ads. So half of that age cohort is not looking at the newspaper to learn about arts events. And as it gets younger, almost non-existent. So 35 to 44, 3/4 are not looking at newspaper. They're looking to flyers and email. But however, when the 75 and older set, 70%, 69% identify newspaper ads as where they're finding out about upcoming events.
That's so interesting. Well, let me back up and just ask you a couple of questions. One's an observation, which is in a focus group that we did last year, I believe it was, with probably in the 25 to 34 age range, and we asked them to look at various direct mail pieces that we send out. And while it was a focus group, so class, don't take too many takeaways from it, because it wasn't credible in terms of quantifying it. But several people would say that when they would look at a brochure, they would go, "Oh, it's so many pages, and what a waste of paper, and it's too complicated." But when they looked at a postcard, they liked the postcard. It was easy to use. It was flipped over. It didn't use too much paper, and it didn't have a fold in it, which I guess meant that so it made me realize that postcards are sort of like the king of convenience in terms of direct mail. And so what we find that we do is it's a real combination of postcarding and emailing in combination with each other that helps to generate the most results.
Yeah.
So that's one comment. The other one is just is interesting to look at the newspaper ads, because oftentimes I think, well, there are a few folks in the arts marketing world who are ready to sort of abandon newspaper altogether. And I'm not there yet myself, but I think we've cut our print media buying back significantly over the last several years. And yet I think that for our organization, there are still moments where we want to have that print ad because it helps our older patrons, and it helps our musicians and our company as a whole know that there are, that we're still exists. There's something about seeing the company outside of the hall itself, out in the world, that makes it's kind of it's an internal thing, I guess, more than anything. It makes the family feel reassured.
Yeah, and you have to be honest about why you're advertising in the newspaper. And certainly not putting this out there to say you should not be advertising in the newspaper, but let's just be honest about who we're reaching and what our objectives are. And I think if it's important for your musicians and your board members, your board members probably fall in that age range that is reading the newspaper. And so let's be honest about, like, are you going to get the highest return for the newspaper? I mean, that you have to measure, but I could probably guess if you took some of that money into social media, you could see a more immediate return. But if you're honest about the objectives, like, we want our board members and our musicians and, as you said, family to see this. Yeah, I mean, there's justification to be spending those ad dollars in the newspaper.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm not suggesting, just as you are, not to abandon print or that that it's necessarily a bad thing if you're honest about it. I do think that that when you really objectively look at it, though, print, you can't determine what the response is. You can't determine when people are going to look at it or not. If it's going to be seen at all. You can't control. There's nothing reactive about it or responsive about it. I mean, almost any measure, digital is far better than print.
Right, definitely.
Moving on. Yeah, this section on media consumption was really interesting, and I guess also too there was a part here about the role of TV. Yes.
Yeah. So definitely get into that, but let's start by looking at newspaper, since you were just talking about that.
Thank you. That's what I meant to say. Yeah.
Yeah. So national newspaper, national magazines, local newspaper. So this sort of gets to the crux of the last conversation. By national newspaper, we mean like the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, or USA Today. National magazines would be like Vanity Fair or GQ. And a local newspaper would be like the Seattle Times or the Cincinnati Enquirer, or for example. And you can see here, younger folks are just not really reading any of that. Pretty small numbers. In fact, the younger people are reading more than national local newspapers, national magazines. When you do look at those 65 plus, like fully 77% are in a local newspaper. Now, we should note that this is monthly, so this is at least once a month. So this is not saying daily, this is not saying weekly. This is being very generous towards the newspaper.
Yeah,
and
really.
It's saying, at least once a month, are you reading the newspaper? And it dramatically falls by age. So when you looked at that last graph, you saw, and I'm going to jump back to it really quickly, the 65 plus, 77% of them are reading the local newspaper at least monthly. So of that last bar all the way to the right, we took that subset of data only. And the next slide only looks at those people, of those 77% of people who are 65 plus and read the newspaper, or 65 plus, and we said, okay, what else do they do? So we broke out that set of people, and we said, are they reading news online as well? And a full 89% of that cohort that reads the print newspaper also reads news online. 53% of them use Facebook. About half of them stream TV and movies. And I thought these last two are really dramatic. 90% of them go to your organization's website, which means you can cookie them and reach them when they are reading the news online, which fully 89% of them are doing. And then 90% of them have purchased performing arts tickets online. So most likely you should have their information, and you should be able to target them, if you set up your infrastructure correctly through remarketing ads, or bid up on their search, or reach them through social media marketing. So, it goes to this point that older people are definitely spending time on these more 20th century vehicles, but they're also using digital. They're also using the 21st century vehicles as well, which then goes back to the question of how are you going to spend your limited marketing budget? And it's not a world where you can say one or the other. And most likely it's both.
Interesting.
So then we looked at that same comparison of online versus print news sources. So those that identify themselves as getting news online, and those that identify themselves as getting news by reading the print newspaper. And then we sliced and diced that by age. And you can see all age cohorts consume news online more than in print, except those 75 plus. And so, buying ads digitally in newspapers, and we believe programmatically is the way to do that, not buying directly in the Seattle Times, but buying people based on their behavior. So those who have been to your website, I don't care if they're on the Seattle Times or CNN or ABC.com, I want to be able to reach them. And so that difference becomes dramatic when you look at those under 54 in terms of reading news online versus on the newspaper. Should we keep going?
Yep, that's great.
Yeah, I just wanted to call that out, this in particular. So, this is sort of telling for the future. I mean, the fun thing about working in digital is every 3 months it changes. If you had asked me, 6 months ago or a year ago about lots of things, the data just changes. And I mean, this study is going to be a year old and we're going to have to sunset it and do it again. We're releasing a new study in a couple months about benchmarking how arts organizations are using data, and then we're going to do this study again next year. And so
I was just going to ask you that, as a matter of fact, because it's there's so much that's being propelled forward and in such motion that it seems as though it would be an annual kind of thing.
Yeah, we're going to do it every 2 years. This was really interesting when we looked at, so now we're looking weekly, before we were looking monthly. And so you can see, so this is all age generations, this is all arts buyers, all 29,000 people took this study. Where are they spending their media time on a weekly basis? And this is just not about where they're spending their time to learn about arts, just in general, where are they spending their time? So 50% on a weekly basis check the local newspapers at least once. 65% check Facebook at least once. So Facebook is more used by arts buyers on a weekly or greater basis than local newspaper. The only thing that is greater than Facebook is cable broadcast and satellite television. Which we said earlier is out of reach for most arts marketers, but Facebook is higher than commercial radio, public radio, paid video streaming, national or international news websites, and local newspapers. So fully 2/3 of arts buyers are Facebook weekly or more. So we thought that was one of the real staggering findings here.
So you're also looked at social media in more depth, and as you said before, it seems as though Facebook is just the dominant force.
Yeah, so we asked which social media platforms do you use weekly, and these are the top 4 that were reported: Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Snapchat. What you don't see on here is Twitter, because it was not one of the top 4. I wrote a blog post about this. I think it was less than 20% of arts buyers are using Twitter regularly, which was surprising. And you look on even the youngest demographic that will often not admit they're using Facebook that often, the data across all those buyers showed that they are. And then YouTube, Instagram, and Snapchat. If we can dive in more, looking at Facebook, you can see the drop off by age. And then for younger audiences, they're just on a broader range of platforms with more frequency. And for the older folks, it's almost all about Facebook. Get asked about Snapchat quite a bit, and I think this is actually interesting. And, we saw Snapchat make a real fast ascension. A lot of people were using it. A lot of younger people were using it. And this study was taken once Instagram stories existed, but I think Instagram stories really hurt Snapchat's growth because Instagram, which is owned by Facebook, tried to buy Snapchat and for $1 billion, and Snapchat passed, and then Facebook released Instagram stories, and we've seen Snapchat usage decline. It's really remarkable that after age 34, basically, there's not much usage of the Snapchat platform.
I guess part of the takeaway here is that if you've got limited dollars to spend on social media, you really don't want to chase some of these other platforms.
Yeah, I mean, I say like it really is about, I think the biggest challenge for any marketer and particularly arts administrators does come down to dollars and staff resources. And so if you can run a campaign on across Facebook and Instagram, we're never in a situation where, we're not like Geico where you have $1 billion and you have to reach everybody. It's like, even if you gave me $10,000 in Facebook, I'm not going to reach all the people that I could reach. So you give me $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, arts organizations just don't have the budget to even flex through these one channels. And so I think we really recommend a focus where the eyes and ears are. And I mean, interestingly, about 85% of digital advertising dollars are spent across Google and Facebook platforms because that's where really people are spending their time. And that's the strategy we're recommending. And you look here, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. I mean, Facebook and Instagram are Facebook products. YouTube is a Google product. Snapchat is be interesting to see what happens to Snapchat. But yeah, focus. What are people doing on social media? They're watching a lot of videos. We've seen more and more arts organizations spending their money producing videos, and it's something we strongly encourage. So we looked here on a daily or a few times per week. People are watching more videos on Facebook and Instagram than they are on YouTube, which is surprising given that YouTube is a video platform. But if you think about your own usage of YouTube, typically, I'd say this is different by age, but often people are going to YouTube and using it as a search engine when they're looking something up or when they're sent a link. People are going to Facebook and Instagram more often when they're bored or looking for entertainment, so they're often being served video, which is why you see more video viewing frequency on Facebook and Instagram than YouTube. It isn't until you look at about once a month or more that you see the real breadth or depth of YouTube. YouTube does have more users than Instagram. Barely. Now, Instagram passed a billion users maybe last month. Facebook still has over 2 billion. YouTube, I think YouTube's like 1.2 or 1.3, I could be wrong, billion, definitely between 1 and 2 billion. These are incredible. I mean, if you think of when I say billion, when I say Facebook has 2 billion users, what is the population of the United States? It is massive, like how the reach and power of the platform.
Yeah, it's staggering. Wow. Okay.
So the last two sections here are about arts websites, and we just sort of scratched the surface in this presentation. I think it's really important for arts administrators to understand why are visitors coming to your website. And I've sat through many organizational website redesigns. I know you've been involved in those projects. They are, they're complicated projects because arts organizations have many stakeholders that all really care about what they're doing. The education department really cares about their education programs. The development department really cares about raising money. The marketing team and the programmers really want people to buy single tickets and subscriptions. Those are all valid things. But we take the point of view that you should design your website to serve a user's needs. And so we asked, why are people coming to arts websites? And the answer, by and large, is to read about upcoming programs and purchase tickets. And so we think that organizations should do this study for themselves and understand why people are coming to their website and design their website accordingly. And make it really easy for people to read about upcoming programs and purchase tickets. And, should you make a website that could accept donations and make it easy to donate? Absolutely. Should your donation, development real estate be as significant on the website as information about the programming? No, it shouldn't. It should be served to the right people at the right time. And this also gets into the idea of that people visit arts websites at various stages in their information gathering, purchase, and event attendance process. So people are coming, 26% of people are coming after they come and attend a program to read more, watch video. And we think it's really important that organizations are serving that kind of content that gives people who have seen something more details about it so they can evangelize on behalf of the organization. And we know that when people talk about your organization, it's 13 times more effective than you as the marketer talking about it. So making sure you have the content that allow people to evangelize. When I see a show that I love, I'm hungry for more information about it. I want to watch videos, I want to read reviews, and we think it's really important for organizations to make sure that that information is readily available on their website.
Just to pause for a second on this, I think that it seems like such an obvious thing, and it seems like organizations wouldn't be would obviously want to make their website, easier to use for purchasing tickets and to reading about upcoming programs. But oftentimes it's hard for an organization, if they're not sort of customer centric to begin with, to do that in spite of the evidence. So this is really valuable for people to see, because it helps an organization get out of its own way. Let me put it that way.
Definitely. We actually, we dug into this and are taking this information in our benchmark survey, where the one we're about to publish in a few months. We surveyed 200 arts marketers within an arts organization, and we asked, why is it so hard for you to make your website easier to use? And interestingly, the number one reason was limitations with their ticketing system. So, which isn't surprising, but you're handcuffed by your infrastructure often. So, getting in their own way, I think that gets in the way for sure.
Yep.
Website. We want to look at video viewing by age on websites, and I thought it was interesting. Since we know that younger people are watching videos on Facebook and Instagram, older people are not as much, but we found a slight increase in older people watching videos on websites. And we know from other studies that when people watch videos, it increases their likelihood of purchasing that event. So we just think it's really important to make sure that the videos that you're putting on social media, you're also putting on your production or event detail pages, especially to reach that older patron to help them make sure they see it and increase your conversion rates.
That's great. Yeah.
Finally, we're in a mobile first world, which means more people globally are viewing web content on mobile phones than on desktop or laptop PCs. And we found in the survey that 38% of all site visitors arrived on a smartphone last year. 23% did so on a tablet, 84% did so on desktop, which means if you look at that, 16% of people are only coming on a tablet or smartphone. Only 84% on desktop or laptop, and a full 38%, almost half, said they use the smartphone to access your site. And we're in this multi-device world where 38% indicated if they visited on a desktop or laptop, they also visit on mobile or also visit on tablet. So when we're doing our campaigns, we need to really think about the same user using multiple devices and making sure when we're doing like infrastructure and measurement that we're setting up our measurement infrastructure to track the same user across desktop and laptop and a tablet. So we know like oftentimes people will research when they hear about something, they'll look it up on their smartphone, and then say later that night they'll do more research on their laptop, and then they'll on their lunch break at work they'll buy it from their work computer. That is 3 devices for one visitor, and we track that and we make sure, particularly on a tool like Facebook, because users are logged in across all devices, it's very easy to track that same user across all those platforms. Google is also getting smart about that, but as a marketer, it's really important to think about how all of those visits relate, and that a lot of that visitation is overlap with the same visitor, making sure you're setting up your infrastructure to be able to measure and track that.
Yeah, and to that point, it really begs the question for our performing arts groups that they not just think about their website, but they also think about the mobile experience as well.
Definitely, 100%. I thought this was really interesting. This is about purchasing. So 88% purchased on a desktop or laptop, 37% purchased on a smartphone, 21% purchased on a tablet. We asked, would you prefer to do? 79% of patrons prefer to purchase tickets online versus on the phone or via mail or walking up to the box office window. And a fully 95% of people purchased a ticket online last year. So the reason that data is not equal is because this question asked for the organization that sent the survey versus in general. So you may have not purchased a ticket from the organization that sent you the survey, but you may have purchased some, say a Broadway ticket online. So 95% of these buyers purchased online. So it's just, I don't think many people say this anymore, but we used to hear a lot that, my older subscribers don't buy tickets online, and we now know that's just for the most part not true.
Yeah, just to come back to this other point, the mobile experience point, I bet that if you had done this survey 3 years ago, the smartphone usage or the smartphone purchase would have been much lower. It seems to me that mobile experience has gotten so much better for across all arts organizations that number and the confidence by the patrons to use smartphones has improved as well.
Definitely, I think it's no longer in the early adapter phase. It's definitely more of the general public is comfortable doing things online. My colleague bought a car on her phone. It's just moving, especially as we integrate tools like Apple Pay and PayPal and Amazon Pay, like all of those. They make it much easier to purchase online, and we really encourage our arts organizations to incorporate those tools to make it as seamless and easy as possible to purchase tickets on the phone. And that's the whole presentation here. I know if you have, I appreciate all the questions you've been asking throughout. If there's any more.
Well, just one question I would say, which is, given all that we've talked about, if you're a performing arts marketer, how do you prioritize? How do you take this information and prioritize your marketing budget? So, where do you spend and where do you not spend?
I think it's a great question, and I don't think it's a one size fits all. I think you really have to. One thing I learned doing this study with Wolf Brown is that arts organizations spend less than 1% of their marketing budget on research, and I think research is it's important to just first ask the question, what are we selling and who is our audience, and really profiling and understanding who our audience is. And I'm going to speak in generalities. You look at your season and your Seattle Symphony, say, most likely the classical music buyer is a predominantly older, predominantly more wealthy, buyer than, say, if you're going to do like a Harry Potter concert, which is going to be more targeted at a younger audience, probably more people with families and kids. Or if you're going to do a Lord of the Rings concert, which you've done, is going to be targeted at a younger demographic. So I think first of all, you have to look at your programming and then understand your media mix. And so we take a very iterative approach and constantly test things and optimize and iterate. So I'd say if you're doing, we have a number of clients now. For them, there are certain programs that we only advertise digitally, not their whole, season, but key programs. Like, for example, Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater has been our client for over 10 years now. And every single year we have chipped away at their newspaper advertising, invested more and more on digital. This year, we did a case study with them. They have two companies. They have the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater, which is their main touring company. They also have a secondary company called Ailey 2, which tend to be younger dancers. They're generally performing at smaller theaters, and their audience tends to be younger. And so based on a lot of testing we had done with the first company, we decided to cut all non-digital advertising for their Ailey 2 season, and we're really thoughtful and used all the data we had from past campaigns, and we oversold the season without any traditional advertising by only using social media, display, and search. And so, we encourage organizations, when you have programs that you think you can test being more digital. We also just finished a campaign with the Cincinnati Playhouse in the Park for their on sale. And, this is their core constituent. And in knowing that their core constituent had been to their website, they had their email addresses for their subscription on sale and their on sale, we only did digital, and we broke sales records. And so again, we were confident that based on our past experience that we were able to reach these people online. And so we took a measured risk and we did it, and we had a really positive success. The final case study is the Phoenix Symphony, which Charlie, this case study. They last year, as an experiment, did their 100% of their single ticket marketing with us via digital tools only, and they had a really successful season. And what they point to more is the return on their marketing spend. They had to spend significantly less on marketing. And in terms of overall dollars, in many cases, they sold more. And it was a combination of digital marketing and pricing strategy. Again, they're still using direct mail for subscriptions, but primarily for their single ticket season, they moved to digital only. Now, again, like we talked about earlier, there's still, if you're the Boston Ballet selling a Nutcracker, or the Pacific Northwest Ballet in Seattle, you're going to want to use newspaper, you're going to want to use radio, you're going to want to use direct mail. So again, it's a fun, interesting time to be a marketer. I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer.
Yeah, I agree with you. You really have to examine your own market, your own product offerings, and really, to your earlier point, do some research.
Yeah.
Well, Erik, thank you very much for your time today. And really, I know that our class will benefit from hearing you and your report, and I appreciate your taking the time. Thank you.
Absolutely. And Roosevelt students at Capacity Interactive, if you are interested in this, we do have a pretty comprehensive internship program. So if you're interested in that, check out our internship program. We had 17 summer interns here. I think we're going to have 6 or 8 in the fall. So we're always looking for people who are passionate about the arts and digital marketing. So thanks for that. Letting me have that plug, Charlie. And thanks for doing this. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Take care.
Hey, Erik. Erik?
Yes.
Sorry.